Hello, today I want to share how to make this mouse, which is a free pattern on my website. The pattern is 4 pages. The fourth page is really the only one you need to print, and it is the pattern pieces. I have put on here a piece for each of the pieces that need to be cut rather than saying cut 2 or cut 4, because I like to use double stick tape like this brand right here, to put those pieces onto the felt. And it makes it much easier for me to cut out that way. You'll also need a piece of string, and this is kind of the preferred string here, but I used jute on this one, and if you want a stiff tail, that's a really good one. And I was considering this silk ribbon as well, if for an alternative to the string. You'll also need a pair of beads like I have here, or some buttons for the eyes. If you're using a felt or other material that has a wrong side and a right side, that they're different, unlike this, then you'll want to turn over the opposite side of your pattern pieces so that they work together. So what I've got here is I'm treating this as if this is the right side of the fabric, and I've got 2 legs where you can see the writing and 2 legs where you cannot, so that they will go together and create 2 legs. I didn't mention that I am using wool felt, 100% merino wool felt, and the supplier that I buy it from refers to it as Holland wool felt. It's a 1 millimeter thickness, good sturdy felt. I encourage you, I will put the link to the supplier that I use, but I encourage you that if you do not live in the Pacific Northwest, that you find someone close to you to purchase from. These pieces right here, the hands and the nose, are more of a representation of the scraps of felt that we're going to use. So I was like, if you've got a circle or a triangle or even a square of pink wool felt to use for the nose, then yeah, you can, that'll work. The hands, take yourself a piece of scrap and a pair of pinking shears or scallop shears, and then you want to trim across there once, shift it over slightly, and trim across there again, so that you get different heights of little zigzag. The scallop shears do the same thing. And then cut that down into about the same width as the picture shows. So I believe that's about 5 millimeters. And we'll use that for the little hands. Now this is totally optional. It makes making the hands a lot more fiddly. So it's not, you can just leave the hands off if you don't want to deal with that. Also, reserve your little pieces of scrap felt off of cutting everything out to use as stuffing. To begin sewing, you're going to take your 2 body pieces, and you'll note that the pattern piece has some letters on it, N, an F, an H, and a B, that coordinate to, this is the head gusset, and the H goes to the H and goes around the head like so, and the N and F match up with the N and F, well, not exactly, but that maybe I should change that. They go in like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by taking one of the bodies. We'll peel that off there. And you're going to line up your belly gusset on here, and then you are going to stitch up to the point. So you'll just kind of match it up and whip stitch that on right there. Once you have the one side of the gusset stitched up to just below the chin, you're going to want to line the other side up. So make sure your noses match and your back is matched up, and you may want to pin that in place to help keep it from moving. But you're going to sew down the other side of this gusset onto the other piece. So line it up and stitch down this way. When you find yourself at the end of the gusset and you've knotted that off, you're going to take your thread to the inside before you cut it. That'll help keep any little stray ends from showing on the outside. So now that we have our belly gusset in place, we are going to stitch from the top of that gusset to the tip, just past or right to the tip of the nose, which, since it's not a hard spot to indicate, it's actually okay for you to stitch all the way, can you see that there, around, if that is appealing to you, or to stop down here. So somewhere in here, stop. Once you've stitched up the chin, you're going to take the head gusset piece and the end that says H there, you're going to place that where you stopped sewing on the chin, and then you will stitch. So I knotted off my thread, but I didn't cut it. And you will stitch along here, then shift your head gusset and continue stitching, and as you bring the head gusset around to match up. I did not mention that instead of a whip stitch, you can use a blanket stitch. I know a lot of people are really good with a blanket stitch and it just looks absolutely beautiful. So that's an option. And I have the blanket stitch guide and the whip stitch guide and one other in the pattern. When you reach the end of the head gusset, you have the option of stitching down the back and make sure you've lined up the bottom edge, or you can stitch back up the other side of the head gusset. Either way, this whole side is what needs to be done. You can actually bury that end inside and start here and go all the way up, which is probably what I'm going to do, but Okay, once you have that back all stitched up, you'll want to stuff your mouse. This is where I make use of those scraps, but I also have wool stuffing that I will use because there's not going to be enough scraps here. But you want to make sure that you get it poked up into the nose so that the nose is filled out, because if you just start sticking stuffing in there, for some reason it just goes right past and leaves that spot hollow. So go ahead and stuff your mouse. Once you've got this all stuffed out and rounded like you wanted the little mousy head to look, and the nose is good and stuffed, I've got some space still to put stuffing in there, but I'm going to go ahead and sew the base on. So on here it is marked F for front and B for back. It's pretty symmetrical, so it's not very important, but you don't want it to go this way on there. You want it to go long way front to back, and you just whip stitch that, and be sure you stick in the stuffing before you make it all the way around. So like go halfway, put in the rest of your stuffing, and finish. Before you finish stitching up the bottom of the mouse here, and you've added your last of your stuffing, you're going to want to put the tail in, and that means taking this string at least on the end that goes into the mouse, put a knot in the end of the tail to help it anchor, and you'll stitch through this knot as well once you've got it on the inside. Now this particular string, I like to stick a knot in the other end as well, You'll have to judge whether or not your string needs another knot. So you'll place that knot just inside, right there. I don't see, the knot is just in there, and then my thread is coming out the top, and I am going to pass through that knot as I come up from the underside fabric so that it's fully anchored. That's a little bit of a challenge. So I'm through the knot and then back up basically where the thread started. And let's make sure that we don't get caught on the tail. Then make sure that it's fully tucked in there. Make another round, possibly through. Yeah, go ahead and go through again. And this time I got wrapped around the tail. And then continue your stitching on around the side. I don't know if you noticed, but I did switch colors of thread for right here so that it would match. It's not necessary, but I thought it was a nice extra little detail to put there, is to have that particular thread color matching there. Now we're going to set the mouse that is now stuffed aside, and we're going to put together some legs. So you're going to want to take 2 legs pieces, and you are going to whip stitch all the way around, or blanket stitch all the way around, and then you're going to give it just a tiny amount of stuffing and then stitch up the bottom. Once you have your little legs put together, another optional thing that you can do is you can make that divot that appears when the animal, the mouse, lower leg here, when they're in that crouched position, their upper leg and their lower leg has a divot between it. You know, it's actually completely separate, you know, bits, but you're going to represent it with a simple little stitch that goes across and makes an indentation just slightly across there to represent that that is the knee bending right here and the ankle bending right there, and you'll knot it off after you've gone around. I usually go around twice, and bury that end of the thread back inside. Then when we go to attach the legs, we can continue with using this area, this divot, and probably a heavier thread. Okay, I went and got a heavier thread, and I have knotted it together so that it's actually 2 strands. And I'm going to go in down here low on the mouse and come out in approximately the same spot on the other side. And then I am going to pick up a leg, and I am going to stitch into the leg right at the back of that area. Now, if you chose not to do this, then you just pick a spot somewhere in here about halfway across the leg, but just above, you know, that illusion of the lower leg. And then you're going to stitch back through, being sure that there is a gap from where the thread came out and where you're going back in. And my toes are not forward. We're in the wrong spot. Forward. Okay, it actually is in the right spot. If I pull my thread tight and it goes in where it's supposed to, be sure that you've tightened up your attachment point. Okay, back in, come out behind our rather bulky knot. I'm going to trim off that loop. And then you're going to go into the other leg, but you're going to go in back further because of where we came out here. You want to match up with the placement. So that should bring it, the toes, sorry, I started fumbling. That should bring the toes to the same spot. If everything's snug and everybody's where they're supposed to be. Now we're a little back, so I'm going to pull forward as I go in. So I'm going to go back in the same, similar to what we did before, to come back out on the other leg. Now, when we get done doing this, we're going to go and place a knot underneath, I think, that our thread is making loops. Okay, don't pull it too tight. It'll stop adjusting itself on this second path, I think. Path is not the right word. Pass is the word I wanted. So we're coming back up again. And now is when I would go in and make a knot, probably on, I'd go in here and make a knot on this side, right up underneath, so you don't get caught in the leg when you come out with your needle. Pass the needle and make a knot here to hold the legs on. Now, the top of the leg is going to want to go out away, which is totally cute, and in that crouch down position. You can totally leave it like that, or you can stitch a little stay stitch between the body and the upper leg to pull it in closer to the body. So you'll want to go in where you made that knot and come up right here above near the top of the leg, but not all the way to the top. So you're going to want some space there, so that you want it to stick out a little bit anyway. Then once you've got it coming out of the body, you go into the leg and then go back into the body and then back into the leg. Make another little knot. Making sure you don't get your tail tangled up in there. Don't want a tail stuck in the knot. Then take your needle, go into your body. Since we're going to do the same thing over here, let's see, we're going to come out a little higher up than that. Let's see if I can show that. That is basically in the same spot that is going in, it's coming out the other side. Move the leg out of the way so that we don't stitch into it before we're ready to, because we don't want it to come out on the outside. So we just want to go in and only be picking up the inside of the leg. Then into the body. And double check your toes and everything. Make sure you aren't pulling things out of where you want them. Back into the leg. So try and line up your needle with straight across from where it came out of the body when it goes into the leg. Pull that up, go through the body again. Again, trying to line up your where it comes out of the leg with where it's going into the body. And knot. Go back into the body, out the bottom. Snug it up a little bit and snip. And the end should pull itself back into the body. And your legs are attached. And see, there's a little bit of space, but not a whole lot once you've done that. But again, that is not necessary. You could also, if you wanted to, stitch, just keep all your stitches, you know, go all the way through and have them come out on the outside and be seen. And then you could actually make these hinged to where they moved, they rotated, you know, which they don't do right now. I do want them to stick out just enough to help with his balance. So I usually kind of encourage the toes to stick out, the knees a little bit, so that he doesn't wobble too much. Another thing that can help with the wobble, if that's a concern, is you can put a piece of cardstock in there before you sew it up, and that would make this flat, and then it would be less likely to wobble. Okay, next thing is going to be the arms. And this is where those optional hands come in. So you're going to take these hands that we've made. I don't know if you can even see the little fingers. They're barely noticeable. So again, that would not be necessary. You know, absolutely, that is an option. You're going to tack this in place on the inside of the arm, and then after you've got this stitched down, and this needs to be the middle of the arm, or approximately in the middle. There, you're going to then, so I'm doing the third stitch on the piece of paper is called, I think I call it a tack stitch, where you take about 3 stitches in the same spot and it works like a knot and it holds the thing in place. Okay, so once that's held in place, you are going to fold your arm and whip stitch down this and across here as well. So just whip stitch this together all the way down and across. Once you've whip stitched that closed on that edge and all the way to the back, you've knotted it right here. You're going to go back in there at that upper edge of the fold, and you're going to come out just above where, if you take this arm and you fold it in half, you want to come out just behind that fold and then go back in just in front of that fold. And then the needle needs to come out below the hand at the seam. You snug that up just a little bit, but don't worry about it too much because it's not going to hold until we go back the other way and do that again. So you're coming up in the same place you went down, going back in and out, right as close as you can get to that corner of the stitch. It's not a corner. Oh, well, I guess it is. Anyway, the bottom part of the arm there. So, and you'll note that when I pulled that, it stayed more in a bent position without trying to come undone. And you can pull that, well, without pulling too tight. You don't want to break your thread. But you can see you can get a full bend in the arm. That is a fully bent arm. or you can let it relax a little bit and have a partially bent arm. Then you tie, when you've got the bend where you want it, you tie a knot, which my needle just fell off the thread. You tie a knot, and that will anchor everything, and it will stay in this bent position, and then you can just right there place it and whip stitch it to the body only along the back edge here, so that this little arm has movement out this way. As far as placement on the arms is concerned, I try to make it to where their little hands can be right there under their mouth, and whip stitch so that they can, you know, move around if you want them to. And as far as attaching the legs goes, you could whip stitch this down, and instead of the way in which I tacked it, it's up to you how you go about it. Now we're going to put on or put together the ears. There is on the pattern piece a little dot and a little dot on the pink pattern piece, and those two dots line up like so. And then you take, so you can see it's you can set it back just a little bit so that you get just a little bit of the tan or gray standing out from behind the pink. You will stitch in between the two layers so that your knot is hidden, and you can whip stitch this bottom part together. Only takes a couple of stitches there, and then you have the option of taking a let's see, we want to go from midway, taking some stitches to give that inner ear look. So it's a little V, and what I do is I go in part way through the back. So the idea is that you shouldn't see the needle on this side, and it should come up like so. It is attached to the felt of the tan or gray, but it is not gonna, the stitch is not gonna show. Now, if your thread matches really well, you don't have to work as hard to hide it. But then you come back down here, and you have a cute little V inside the ear, and you knot it off, and then you can go straight to placing the ear on the head without removing thread. Just move it forward to the front. Well, take your needle and move it to where it is stitched through to the front edge, you know, back at those dots. Take a little stitch to make sure that you're good and anchored there, and place the ear. I like to place it along the seam and whip stitch it about halfway to like the base of that V you created, and then fold the ear and whip stitch the second half of the ear going down the head away from the seam. So the first half is stitched to the seam, and the second half is stitched down in towards the head. Okay, placement on the ears is, well, it's up to you how far forward or back you want them. I kind of try to go for halfway on the head, you know, so this is the back and that's the front, so that you're not counting the nose as part of that, and you hit kind of a halfway point there. The other thing that I wanted to show you was, okay, so we're going to try and match it up with the other side. So I'm just laying it down on top of the head, hopefully in the right spot, and I am stitching through the seam that we made on the head gusset and into the ear. And that is how I do the initial whip stitch. Then you basically continue to do that even after you've pivoted, only you don't have the seam to go by. You're just stitching into the head like that instead. And if you need to do it in a two-parter where you stitch into the head, pull it out, and then stitch into the ear, that's totally a way to make it easier. This is what I mean by leaving the thread sticking out there so you can snug it up. So I left it there, and then I'm going to knot the thread here, trying not to get caught on his arms and legs. And if you find it's pulling there, and it's right up inside, and you can now snip that off, and it won't show. So here's our tiny little nose. I'm going to go through the bottom of the triangle, or maybe we'll... So you want to have a big enough piece that you get caught, that it doesn't just come apart. Sometimes the felt will just come apart when you make tiny pieces. And so this goes up on his face like a shoe. And you go stitch through the face after you've stitched into the top of the nose. And in order to keep that from looking like a little piggy nose, I will stitch over the top of it. So the first stitch is holding it in place, and the second stitch is bringing it all in. And that's really all you need to do. His nose is in place. He's got a cute little pink nose. You could do more stitches if you wanted to, but I actually don't find them productive. The mouse is finished and ready to find a mouse hole and be your cute little house mouse. Bye-bye.